Thank you. The next item of business is a statement by Jean Freeman on winter preparedness in social care. The Cabinet Secretary will take questions at the end of her statement, and so there should be no interventions or interruptions. And I call on Jean Freeman.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. Every winter, our social care and health systems face significant pressures from seasonal flu and norovirus. But this year, the COVID-19 pandemic magnifies those challenges as never before. Last week, I set out how we will support our NHS to respond, and today I am publishing the interrelated plan for adult social care. Delivery of this will be backed by £112 million of additional investment to support the sector in providing care to some of the most vulnerable members of our communities. Around 245,000 people receive social care and support in Scotland. That's 1 in 20 of the population. Of those, around 60,000 people in Scotland are receiving home care at any one point in time. People who use social care support in residential and community settings and in their own homes have felt the significant impact of COVID-19 this year. Many of them have lost their life to the virus. Many have become seriously ill. Let me again express my heartfelt condolences to all those affected, to their families and to their loved ones. The impact has been felt too by the staff and the unpaid carers who provide that care and support. Some of them have also lost their lives and some have become seriously ill with long-lasting effects. Let me express my condolences to their families and loved ones and my sincere gratitude to them. The plan that is published today is supported by an evidence paper and the independent care home review, which I commissioned using root cause analysis methodology, both of which, together with the independent report from Public Health Scotland and the Universities of Glasgow and Edinburgh, and the Care Inspectorate's Care at Home inquiry, have informed the thinking and the conclusions of the plan. The Winter Preparedness Plan published today, supports safe care and protection by continuing the effective measures already in place and by applying learning from those published reports and from our direct experience and that of our partners to additional measures that we will introduce and require. The plan is centred on 4 key principles: learning from evidence to protect people from direct impact of COVID-19 and winter viruses, ensuring people can benefit from good physical and mental health and well-being through the provision of high-quality integrated health and care services, supporting the social care workforce to deliver safe support and care and their own positive mental health and well-being, and collaborative working to both plan and deliver high-quality care. The adult social care sector brings together organisations, providers and people from across the health and social care sectors, from private, public and independent providers. This plan has been produced with their engagement and input, and I'm pleased to say has the support of COSLA, our key partner. I want to thank local government colleagues and others from across this wide sector for their constructive, pragmatic and positive approach. The role of local government and health and social care partnerships in the direct delivery or commissioning from third and independent and private sectors are critical to successful delivery. So the NHS, health and social care partnerships and local authorities need to be able to take the lead in ensuring the successful delivery of this plan at a local level. We have set out shared values of communication, cohesion and collaboration nationally and locally, and these must be in place and enacted if we are to have the positive impact that is needed on the lives and well-being of every adult who needs social care support. I want now to set out briefly some of the key steps detailed in the plan against those principles. 77% of those receiving social care services or support are aged 65 or over, and 90% of those living in a care home are over 65, with 1 in 2 of that number aged over 85. We have already made significant progress with effective infection prevention and control, which not only protects against COVID-19, but against all winter viruses. But we need not only to maintain that, but to strengthen it, as the evidence tells us. We will issue new clinical guidance for care homes and community care through the Clinical and Professional Advisory Group and supported by an additional £7 million to support increased infection prevention and control nursing support and training for social care providers. All care homes are vulnerable to COVID-19 outbreaks, so our focus has to be threefold: preventing the virus from entering the home, the early identification of cases, and the prevention of transmission. For older people in the population, we now understand that there are a broader range of COVID-19 symptoms. So we're asking providers to introduce a new daily review of COVID symptoms in care home residents and staff. To support this, the Clinical and Professional Advisory Group will provide and issue a checklist of these broader COVID symptoms, and we will look to provide support to staff so that they can confidently undertake this daily review. Minimising staff movement within and between care settings is also critical to reducing the risk of transmission. The evidence is clear that reducing the number of people in close contact reduces the risk. But we need to do that in a way that does not negatively impact on individual members of this vital workforce. So to support the sector to implement necessary limitations and restrictions on staff movement, we will make funding of up to £50 million available. Across the social care sector, we need to work together to deliver this, working through the practical steps that are needed and ensuring our trade union colleagues are fully engaged with us in this work. Public Health Scotland's analysis of discharges from hospital to care homes reinforces the requirement that hospital discharge to home or to a care home is as safe as possible. So the current national testing requirements for people coming into hospital and being discharged from it remain and must be followed. Ensuring that is the case is a responsibility that rests with boards, with HSCP partnerships with providers, but also with government. Securing the physical and mental well-being of care home residents is critical, and I know only too well the impact that the early phase of the pandemic has had on many. So the reintroduction of health and care services to residents is vital. To help ensure that this can be done as safely as possible, the introduction of testing for these professionals is important and will be implemented in the coming weeks. We will continue also to review visiting guidance. My aim is to maximise the amount of quality time families can safely spend together. We will apply additional protection through the introduction of testing for designated care home visitors and work to secure more localised, evidence-informed decisions, taking into account the new strategic framework protection level arrangements, community prevalence, outbreaks and care home circumstances. We will increase our available wraparound care and continue to support social, community and primary care teams to work alongside each other. Today, we are making up to £50 million available for the Staff Support Fund and for sustainability payments for the sector this winter. We are committed to working with COSLA and wider partners immediately to support the development of effective and timely allocation mechanisms for these funds, and I will say more about that in a moment. Presiding Officer, there can be no doubt of the scale of challenge the adult social care sector has already faced. At the forefront of that, and in many ways bearing the brunt of it, has been its professional, compassionate and skilled workforce. We owe them our thanks, but we also owe them the support they need. We will continue to improve weekly testing for care home staff by completing the transition of the programme to our NHS labs, thereby building in greater certainty of fast turnaround times. This reduces the COVID risk to them, to their families and to those they care for, and we will prioritise testing for care at home staff, recognising that this may be phased in as capacity allows and targeted on those working in areas of high prevalence in the first instance. Testing is important, but infection prevention and control also critically requires the provision of PPE to the right standard and to the guidance set out. So as a government, we will meet the additional costs incurred by health and social care partnerships and providers for PPE and support the provision and access of that to staff, visitors and, where necessary, recipients of care over the winter period. In May this year, we introduced increased collaboration and oversight across partners involving multidisciplinary enhanced oversight arrangements to support the delivery of adult social care during the pandemic. These arrangements remain vital to supporting the safety and improvements in care and will continue. We have introduced the Safety Huddle tool for care homes, with 100% of care homes now signed up to this. It provides care homes and local partners with real-time information they need to effectively manage risk, prevent issues arising and seek support when they need it. In the coming months, we will look to expand that further. And we will work with Scottish Care and CCCPS to identify opportunities to engage with providers on the plan in the coming weeks. Continuing to support technology and digital improvement is important. We've already provided tablets to care homes and now commit a further £500,000 to digital support, ensuring all care homes have access to digital devices, connectivity and support. All of this work and more requires our commitment, our collaboration and most of all the skill and professionalism of staff, but it also requires money. I have agreed with COSLA that we will continue the sustainability funding for social care at the level set for October for the month of November. Over the course of this month, we will work with COSLA and other partners to take a more targeted approach to sustainability funding, making sure people get the support they need, that organisations who need support are able to access it quickly, that services can be sustained and that volume for money is secured. During November with COSLA, we will engage intensively with commissioners and providers to ensure a smooth transition and clarity on support of the financial support until March 2021. Presiding Officer, this is the first national winter plan for the adult social care sector. Like all plans, it is not set in concrete and will have to adapt as circumstances change and new pressures and demands arise. That is all the more certain as we deliver on its requirements in the middle of a pandemic. But the principles it rests on remain. It is a plan built on partnership and it can only be delivered in partnership, with collaboration, clear leadership, investment and pragmatism. Our challenges are many, but our advantages are all that we have already learned, the developing and deepening evidence that informs our decisions, the relationships and leaderships we have at local level across the country and nationally, and most of all, the skill, care and dedication of all those who work in adult social care. And I commend this plan and its supporting papers to members.
Thank you very much. The Cabinet Secretary will now take questions on the issues raised in her statement. I intend to allow around 20 minutes for questions, after which we will move on to the next item of business. It would be helpful if all members who wish to ask a question were to press the request to speak buttons now. And I call Donald Cameron.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. Can I thank the Cabinet Secretary for prior sight of her statement, and can I acknowledge and thank all our social care staff for their work in supporting some of the most vulnerable people in society throughout this pandemic. As we move into winter, we know that care settings are at risk from both COVID-19 and flu. The Cabinet Secretary mentioned visiting guidance in her statement, and I'd like to address that specifically because earlier today I participated in a call with relatives of people in care homes, and some of their stories were truly heartbreaking in terms of still not having adequate contact. While, of course, we recognise the clear need to protect care home residents and staff from the virus, we must look at safe ways that we can reunite families with their loved ones. Given that winter makes all this even more complicated, can I ask 3 specific questions? Has the government considered whether the designated visitor could be changed so that more family members can see relatives in care settings at different times? Has the government considered if there could be a separate COVID-19 secure space in care homes where visits could take place? And does the Cabinet Secretary recognise that there is a worrying lack of uniformity, given that care homes across Scotland are interpreting the rules differently?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Mr Cameron for really important questions, and I too have met with care home relatives, and I'm due to meet them again, I believe, this week, and have heard some of those very distressing stories. So I completely agree on the importance of finding a better way to balance safety with the necessary connections with family and loved ones and indeed friends for many of our care home residents, and for the support that brings in terms of oftentimes the nutrition, oftentimes those who are suffering from dementia, and absolutely helps to address loneliness and isolation. So in answer to your specific question, yes, we have and are considering that the designated visitor is not always the one person. If you think about normal course, if my mum was still with us, if I was a designated visitor from my mum, I wouldn't necessarily always be able to go every time, and so I'd want someone else to be able to go as well, another sibling or whoever it might be. So we have that in place, if you like, designated visitor and backup, but I do think we probably need to be clearer about that. A COVID-19 secure space is an excellent idea. Oftentimes that is the individual's own room, and particularly with the new guidance on designated visitor there for up to 4 hours and so on and so forth. That also includes touch, which is often, and it shouldn't be chaperoned either. There should be PPE. The additional testing will assist with that, and it should allow the holding of hands or the kiss on the cheek or whatever. In all care homes, it's not always possible for them to have a designated COVID secure space other than the individual's own room. So it has to be flexible enough that it can be applied in different care home settings depending on the physical infrastructure that they have. And we are considering with care home providers and with Scottish Care having a sort of COVID responsible officer, if you like, to act as a link that would also help care homes begin to implement some of this in a pragmatic way, but in a way that gives them confidence that they are meeting what we need, but they're being flexible enough. And that takes me to your last question about lack of uniformity. There is a real lack of uniformity across the sector. It is a sector, as you know, that is provided by the public sector, the private sector and the independent sector. There is, on balance, I think, and I understand it, a hesitancy by many providers to take what they believe might be a risk, an additional risk, and that's why we need to help them much more understand how to assess risks, apply all those measures and get a better balance and feel confident they're not going to be got at if they have a case of COVID and they're not going to be blamed for that. This is a really vicious virus. It sneaks in everywhere, and what we have to do is put as many support measures as possible in place. There's also discussions to be had with our directors of public health who have a key role in helping care home providers assess the level of risk in the surrounding community, because that plays into what level of risk you can take or what additional measures you need in place in an individual care home in a particular location. So there's a lot to do in the detail behind this, but these are really important questions.
Monica Lim.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Scottish Labour called for a winter plan, therefore we welcome its publication and will review all of the documents carefully. We have shown we can work with the Scottish Government to achieve the right practical support and outcomes for people like the Staff Support Fund, which I hope will continue to make a difference to frontline workers who we are all grateful to. But I'm afraid that the Government isn't yet in the right place on the issue of resident and family caregiver contact, and I think families will be very disappointed today. I welcome the practical points that have been made by Donald Cameron. I'm sure others will make similar points, but people don't have time to wait, Cabinet Secretary, and she will be aware that a judge has ruled that care home residents in England are legally allowed visitors. Families are now having to think about taking legal action. We don't want that to have to be the case in Scotland. So my appeal to the Cabinet Secretary is to work with all of us on this issue. It's not acceptable to have blanket bans in some parts of the country. That's what we have right now. We have people in care homes who have not seen a member of their family or a close friend for several months. So can I ask the Cabinet Secretary to work with all of us so that we can get this right, so that no one has to endure this winter period on their own?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Ms Lennon for her comments and her questions, and there's 2 points I would want to make. I know the documents that were published today are detailed, they are really important, and I hope that members will take the opportunity to read them. And when they do, I'm very happy that we continue with our meeting of opposition health spokespeople to look at some of the detail on that and bring some of the clinical advice and support to that discussion. I'm also very happy to convene that meeting as soon as possible, as our diaries allow, in order to discuss exactly what you've just asked for, and that is to work across this chamber to see what more we can do in order to ensure that families and those and their loved ones in care homes can spend more quality time, more frequently and for longer together. I can't make care home providers do what I would like them to do. Of course, I know you understand that, but I also want to make sure that we don't have blanket bans, which is why I talked in my statement about more localised decision making, so that we don't have it necessarily the case that because, for example, a local authority is at level 3, that all care home visiting is then automatically banned, or hospital visiting for that matter. So, but that is a risky area. That's why it's at level 3. So we need to recognise that, but also see whether the additional protective measures I've announced, including testing for those visitors, as well as the visiting health and social care professionals, and all the PPE and all the other support I'm talking about, whether that begins to help providers feel more confident about managing the risk, and directors of public health more confident about giving tailored guidance to individual care homes.
Christine Graham, to be followed by Alison Johnson.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. I welcome the Winter Preparedness Plan. Cabinet Secretary, I refer to the focus on the movement of staff between care settings as, quote, critical to reducing risk of transmission. In home settings and care homes in rural areas such as my constituency, Midlothian, South Tweedale and Lauderdale, this will be very difficult to reduce. Can I therefore ask, will guidance take account of rurality, and will funding be available to reduce what currently is necessary travel and alternatively suitable robust PPE where travel between care settings in such rural areas is unavoidable?
Cabinet Secretary.
So this is a really important question, and as an MSP for largely a rural area myself, I completely understand the points Ms Graham is making. Care at home staff are a particularly important group, which is why I am very anxious that as soon as we can put it in place, and that is in the coming weeks, it's not like this time next year or sometime in the new year, as soon as we can put it in place, that we introduce testing for care at home staff, because it's a protective measure for them, but also for those that they care for, because they will see more than one individual in any given working session. I'm also really keen that we make sure that we don't see a repetition of some of the difficulties in the first phase of the pandemic, where those care at home staff were given inadequate PPE supplies for the number of residents or people at home that they were providing care for. And with our health and social care partnerships, we will try and ensure that that is not repeated. My continued commitment to provide PPE to both the care home and the care at home sector stands, and the distribution routes remain, and all of that has been made to work well continues. And we'll continue to discuss with the trade unions and with COSLA, making sure that the guidance on the right PPE in those circumstances is well understood and is implemented, and the individual care at home providers have all the PPE they need I'd prefer it for the week as opposed to for individual shifts.
Thank you. Alison Johnson, to be followed by Alex Cole-Hamilton.
Thank you. An essential part of preparing the social care system for winter will be ensuring that a robust testing scheme is in place for frontline staff. And I am concerned that although routine testing is taking place, Health Protection Scotland guidance states that staff who've previously tested positive for COVID are exempt from being retested during these weekly cycles for a period of 90 days from their initial illness onset. Given that we know so little about reinfection of COVID-19 and that there has been at least one documented case of an individual being reinfected after 48 days, does the Cabinet Secretary believe that it is safe to exempt staff from routine testing for a period of 90 days?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm grateful. This is an important question. I don't believe that I am clinically qualified in any respect to say whether it is safe or not safe. But what I can say is that I am very happy to ask HPS to review the guidance in the light of emerging evidence and to continue to review that guidance in the light of emerging evidence, which is a constant exercise, but it is really important that we do that. On the whole question of testing, we have a detailed discussion this week. I have a detailed discussion this week, which looks to plan some of those additional areas of testing of individuals who are asymptomatic that I have mentioned in my statement, the designated visitors, the visiting health and care professionals, care at home staff, into the scaling up of our own testing capacity. And then I am happy to return to this chamber with a further statement on testing as a whole, so that again members can debate that and of course discuss it with my colleagues in the opposition parties.
Thank you. Alex Cole-Hamilton, to be followed by Kenneth Gibson.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. Further to Donald Cameron's questions, families are still needing closure after a devastating first wave, and many more will be wondering what this winter holds for the safety of their loved ones. After 9 months of not being able to have physical contact with their families and caregivers, the relaxation of visits for family carers is very welcome. But can I press the Cabinet Secretary on Donald Cameron's question about the fact that many homes are still nervous to comply with those relaxations, sometimes for insurance reasons. So what further measures can the Cabinet Secretary bring forward to ensure that these residents are not deprived of the physical contact to the people they love this Christmas? And will care homes be part of the Scottish Government's agenda when they prepare for the UK's Four Nations Summit surrounding Christmas? Thank you.
Cabinet Secretary.
The answer to that last part of Mr Cole-Hamilton's question is yes. Care homes and care at home, or so adult social care, wider than those elderly citizens, much wider than that. It includes a range of residential settings, including supported accommodation and housing, will all be part of what we take into that summit, and I'd hope we can have that productive Four Nations discussion. I completely understand the situation as best I can about care home relatives, and the discussions that I continue to have with the care homes relatives group that I have met will continue to look at what more we can do in addition to the improvement in visiting guidance that I've already spoken about, and the testing of designated visitors that I've covered in this statement. What more can we do? We do have I have regular conversations with Donna McCaskill from Scottish Care and with colleagues, of course, from COSLA about how care home providers are feeling and what it is that they need. Not so long ago, I had a long conversation with the owner of the Balhousie Group and with others. I will continue to do that. Part of what I said in the statement was that we needed to have detailed discussions with Scottish Care and CCPS, who are representative of the majority of providers, about how we can help with the reduction in the movement of staff, both between shifts and between care homes and between care homes and other settings, but also how can we help care home providers feel more confident in applying the visiting guidance, as well as the discussions that we need to have with directors of public health, so that we get closer to tailored guidance for individual care homes. That's part of what I meant by that local decision making.
Thank you very much. Can I encourage sharply focused questions and answers as we go forward? Kenneth Gibson, to be followed by Brian Whittle.
Thank you, Presiding Officer, and I warmly welcome the Cabinet Secretary's statement. And I should say that my mother is a resident in a care home. I think from Donald Cameron, Christine Graham, Alex Cole-Hamilton, we'll get very similar themes. And I think most members are looking for at this point is that there will be consistency wherever it is possible to be delivered in terms of what we can do for people, whether they're in care homes or indeed whether they are being cared for at home, and regardless of where they are in Scotland. And I think the Cabinet Secretary has been very, very good today in emphasising her determination on that front. But I'm just hoping if she can perhaps say just a wee bit more about that, because we want to have consistency across the country.
Cabinet Secretary.
So consistency is a really important point, and I know that Mr Gibson appreciates fully the restrictions on my ability to secure consistency across the piece. However, the importance of COSLA as a key partner in all of this is critical, as is Scottish Care, as is WCPS, and our health and social care partnerships, because there we have the commissioners of much of this care, as well as the providers of much of this care. Now, in the months of this year, we have developed much better relationships with working relationships, very practically focused relationships with all of those groups, and we'll continue that to look at where there is inconsistency in real time. What can we do in order to address that? And how can commissioners, as well as providers, work together to give us greater consistency in terms of the work that is undertaken, the visiting and all the other protective measures. Our job is then to make sure that primary care wraps around that really well, that we provide the PPE, the testing, the support for the staff who are delivering that care, and that we are listening all the time, not only that I am listening, not only to members across this chamber who raise issues, but to families and to others, trade unions in particular, who are raising issues directly with me, and we will keep that going right through until the end of this Parliament.
Brian Whittle, to be followed by Alex Neil.
Thank you, Deputy Presiding Officer. I think there's a very consistent theme running through a lot of the questions today, because a consistent constituent emailed me today to highlight the care home that his father is in offer 5 one-half-hour appointments a day for visiting, which is a total of 35 visits a week for 47 residents. I know others have, and I'm pushed you on this before, Cabinet Secretary, but isn't the Care Inspectorate have enough significant influence in both private and council-run care homes? Surely they can encourage a better visiting regime indoors in a COVID-safe environment be established. And can the Cabinet Secretary offer any funding to help those care homes establish those environments?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I'm glad Mr Whittle has mentioned the Care Inspectorate, because they are a really important part of all of this. They can and do. Their Care Inspectorates in-service inspections, so where they actually are in the home undertaking those inspections, are now undertaken in consultation or directly alongside Health Protection Scotland, so that infection prevention and control runs right through the inspections that they undertake. In doing that, they do discuss with care home providers the well-being of residents. That's not just about protecting them from infection, that's also about allowing within the guidance health and care services to come into the care home and provide that, as well as family visiting and so on. So the Care Inspectorate is a key partner. They will continue to do that. But I have to repeat, the only way we can get consistency is if we can secure effective working between local government, Scottish Government, commissioners and providers, so that we provide the support we need in order to help the providers themselves deliver the kind of environment and the safety, alongside the safety, that we require both for their residents in care homes, but also for those who are receiving care at home.
Alex Neil, to be followed by Sarah Bourne.
Presiding Officer, can I first of all congratulate the Cabinet Secretary on the first ever adult social care plan for winter, and welcome in particular the additional resources that are being made available. Presiding Officer, as the Cabinet Secretary said, the age profile of people requiring social care in social care homes in Scotland is 77% are aged over 65 and about half are aged over 85. Precisely the age group that, if they catch COVID, are more susceptible to ending up in hospital and ICU. Can I therefore ask the Cabinet Secretary if she can ask her advisory group to look at the trials going on in Edinburgh and in Liverpool, to look at what early interventions might be able to reduce the hospitalisation rate amongst this age group before they actually catch COVID, so that we can reduce the hospitalisation rate if and when they catch COVID?
Cabinet Secretary.
I'm grateful to Mr Neil. This is a really important point, and I'm very happy to ask the advisory group to do precisely that and to ensure that he and other members are fully aware of the response that they then come back to me. I think there's a couple of additional points to make. One is that widening and and growing understanding of the range of symptoms that older people present. So we talk about the persistent dry cough, the loss of taste, a sense of taste or smell, but actually for older people there are other symptoms that are indicative of potentially that they have the virus and would trigger a test, and that's why that is a central part of my statement, widening that understanding. And the second is the rollout of, I know, a service that Mr Neil is very familiar with and very supportive of, and that is Hospital at Home. Hospital at Home isn't just at home, it's hospital in a homely setting. Lanarkshire, NHS Lanarkshire have done fantastic work on this. Globally recognised for its effectiveness in providing hospital-level care in a home, a person's own home or a homely setting. And the rollout of that will be critical in supporting our elderly residents wherever it is they're living.
Sarah Boyack, to be followed by Ruth Maguire.
Cabinet Secretary, many of the findings from the recent inspection reports from the Care Inspectorate are concerning, with a high proportion of homes receiving letters of serious concern, improvement notices or being graded weak. How confident can we be that these homes will be equipped to care and will act to protect residents throughout winter and the second wave?
Cabinet Secretary.
This is another really important question, and I completely agree with Ms Boyack that many of the Care Inspectors' reports are of concern. I meet with the Care Inspectorate every 2 weeks. We go through individual homes and discuss exactly what they have found, what they have found in their return visits, the level, and in between times, of course, my officials are engaged in detailed discussion about how well the NHS is stepping forward to help those homes, if it is a staffing issue, if it is an understanding of infection prevention and control and good practice, if it is cleanliness, or if it is PPE, whatever the issues are, how well is the local NHS stepping forward to help? How close is the Health and Social Care Partnership to working with that home? And in some instances, the Care Inspectorate deal directly with, if it is a group home, a home that's part of a group, deal directly with the most senior level of management of that group. So we look at all of that, but always in my discussions with the Care Inspectorate is if none of this happens within the next week, what are we going to do about it? And we've seen that in one instance so far, what we have done is the NHS has acquired the home in order to ensure that it can run properly and to the standard that protects the residents and gives them a quality of life. That, of course, is Home Farm Care Home in Skye. In another instance, the Health and Social Care Partnership has ended its contract with a particular care home and worked with families and residents so that people can be moved to an alternative care home that they are happy with and confident in, because we're not getting the level of response from the provider that we need. So we are very focused on this, and helping care homes to improve so that they do meet what we need them to do, but not giving forever for that to happen, and acting if it doesn't come into line as quickly as we need it to.
Ruth Maguire, to be followed by Annie Wells.
Presiding Officer, the Public Health Scotland report published last week highlighted the issue of care home size on the spread of infection. Can I ask the Cabinet Secretary how the winter plan helps minimise staff movement within and between care settings to reduce the risk of transmission?
Cabinet Secretary.
Yeah, the question of care home size was highlighted certainly in that report. It's also there in our evidence paper. It's been there in other emerging areas, including the Care Inspectorate. It's not a straightforward question to answer because a care home is the size that a care home is. We are about to enter discussions with providers of those larger homes about what they need to do in order to try and cohort both their staff, so that sometimes these care homes are in 2 floors, so that we have a bubble of staff that don't move between one floor and another. That we try and, as we do in hospital, cohort individuals who are COVID positive. So that, again, we're trying to minimise the mix between those residents who have the virus where there is an outbreak and those that don't, in order to provide clinical care where it's needed and protection where it's needed. Inevitably, some of that will produce an additional financial requirement, and that is part of the additional 112 million that I've spoken about in my statement, which is additional to the additional 150 million that I've announced previously. So we're looking at £262 million in addition to what was already in the Scottish Budget for social care. But we need to work through individually with care home providers of those larger homes exactly what they need to do and how we can assist them to do that in order to address the concern that is around about the size of care homes and the movement of staff between care homes.
Annie Wells, to be followed by George Adam.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. As the Cabinet Secretary touched upon, ensuring that families can spend as much quality time as safely possible with loved ones is vital for mental well-being. However, I was just wondering if the Cabinet Secretary could expand on what additional protection will be in place in regards to testing care home visitors.
Cabinet Secretary.
So we will introduce regular testing of all care home visitors. What we're looking at just now is whether that will be through the PCR testing route or through a quicker testing route, and the logistics of how we do that care home by care home. My preference is that we do it in a way where it is NHS labs who will be processing the results, so alongside care home staff testing. But also designated visitors, where we are talking about that lengthier visit, that visit that opens up the opportunity for touch and closer care, if you like, by effectively caregivers from the family. What PPE requirements will be needed. Our PPE National Procurement Service is geared up to increase the PPE that we already provide and make sure that care homes have all the PPE they need, not only for their own staff, but for those visitors, so that we can make it as protective as possible. What I know for sure is that those families who want this level of visiting will be dedicated and thorough in all the steps that we ask them to take in order to protect their loved ones. I have absolutely no doubt about that at all.
George Adam, to be followed by Neil Findlay.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. Can the Cabinet Secretary explain what further steps have been taken through the Winter Social Care Plan to enhance infection prevention and control within the care sector?
Cabinet Secretary.
So there are a number of steps. Obviously, the testing that I've talked about in care homes for additional groups of people who are not symptomatic, as well as care at home staff is part of that. PPE is a central part of that. And not only ensuring that the distribution routes continue to function well, the ordering routes continue to function well, but that people get the right PPE for the circumstances that they're in. There is continuing work to enhance infection prevention and control, so that care home staff and care at home staff feel that they have all the training and the support that they need to know exactly what they need to do, including the putting on and the taking off of PPE, which is a critical element of infection prevention and control. And then our care inspectorate, with their both their unannounced and their planned visits around the care home sector in particular, have a critical role to play to ensure that infection prevention and control is of the highest possible standard. Our wraparound primary care and the involvement of our partnerships and our directors of public health, of course, are also there, led by our nurse directors, to ensure that everyone has not only the kit, if you like, that they need, but also the training and the support that they need to use that to the best effect.
Neil Findlay.
Thanks, Presiding Officer. For many families, in terms of visiting, not a lot has changed despite the government's announcements. But 8 months down the line, we still see care at home staff not being tested. I've been contacted by people who've lost their jobs and have wanted to move into the care home sector and have moved into that sector, who cannot believe that they don't have routine testing. So it's actually putting people off joining. And we also have many staff members in the NHS who deal with patients every day and who have COVID in their ward, who are still untested. This is 8 months down the line. Cabinet Secretary, come on, this is not good enough. These are people in the front line, the most key workers that we have, and yet we're still not routinely testing them?
Cabinet Secretary.
So I don't disagree with Mr Finlay that it is critical that we test those individuals. And as I've said in my statement and in answer to a number of questions, that we will introduce testing for care at home staff. In terms of testing, well, as I also said in answer to another question, the detailed planning for that is taken further tomorrow in a discussion that I have, and I'm very happy as soon as I have absolute details and dates and the logistics of all of the additional testing that I've described to come back to this chamber and to make another statement on testing and the rollout of additional asymptomatic testing so that members can scrutinise and question that. And in advance of that, of course, to brief our opposition colleagues. In terms of testing of NHS staff, there is testing of some NHS staff. And there is currently work underway by the Clinical Advisory Group about what more testing should we introduce for NHS staff, in what settings. That may include in emergency departments, it may include in other settings, but at the moment it's there in oncology, in long-term care of the elderly and long-term care of psychiatric patients. So there is more to do, and that was identified by those clinical advisors as where we should start. So that is underway, but there is work already underway to look at what more testing should we introduce for our NHS staff, including NHS staff in primary care, who are involved through district nursing, community hospitals and elsewhere. So that work is underway, and the logistics of planning all of that has to be matched against the scale-up of our NHS capacity, as well as what we can secure from the UK Government's Lighthouse Lab.
Thank you very much. That concludes questions on the statement. We will move on in a moment to the next item of business. May I remind members who are leaving or indeed entering the chamber to observe the social distancing measures that are in place in the chamber and indeed across the Holyrood campus. The next item